All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to concentrate mostly. Let me hit this off. Come on. I'm actually going to mostly concentrate just on the torso here, just as an example, and then I will work through everything else. But like we did on the previous video, just make sure you have everything kind of proportionate first before you start like really concentrating on an area. Normally what I would do is sculpt a little bit on everything a little bit, but what I'm going to do instead is actually just sculpt on his body so you can see how to do kind of like flesh, if you will. On his torso here, and then I'll make another video where I'll kind of do his either his pants or his shirt, just to kind of show you how I would handle fabric and that sort of thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually lock everything else but the torso. So I'm just going to go over here and lock all of this stuff up, so that way I'm not worried about messing anything else up but that one bit there. Okay, so you see everything else is grayed out, but oh, I must have missed his boots too. Not that I'm too, because there they are. Not that I'm too concerned about his boots, because it'd be weird to get down there. But okay, so now we're just going to worry about his torso. I'm going to go back to layers, okay? And what we're going to do is, if you recall, I already did Shift D once. So to subdivide, it's Shift D, which is up and down. So we're not going to be tessellating like we did before. We're just going to be using subdivision in order to sculpt the character, okay? So to subdivide is Shift D, but to go up and down levels is page down and page up. I only have 2 levels. You can see them up on the top here. So what I would suggest is you usually want to try and sculpt in as low level as you possibly can. Sorry about my dog squeaking. That'll probably be annoying. It's like somebody with a smoke detector. Anyway, you usually want to try and sculpt it as low level as possible because it'll be actually a little bit easier to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Shift D again. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to try and broadly sculpt some musculature. Okay, so one of the things we can do here though is I can actually add layers. I click on this, and then I'm going to go ahead and rename it. I'm just going to double click on it, and we're just going to say I'm going to call this anatomy. All right, now you'll notice that there's nothing here, but watch, as I'm on this layer now, let's say I sculpt something. So I'm just going to go to regular old sculpt here just to make this a little bit easier, and let's make it a little bit stronger. So B and M. So you can see I can go, woo! Now what's nice is I can turn, now notice that it's locked to that layer. So watch, if I hit page down and go to layer 1 or level 1, it is, I can't sculpt on this anymore. It won't let me. It'll say, you can't do this, okay? Now, if I go back to level 2, you can see now I can. But what's nice is I can turn that layer off. I can delete that layer. Go do delete selected. I can also even adjust the strength of it. I can go lower or higher. So there's a lot of strength in this, and that what it'll allow you to do is basically, and you can also erase the layer. So you might have seen before there is, what is erase? Erase. So I can take something and I can erase out pieces of that layer I don't like. So there's a lot of flexibility in here in that we can kind of use these layers just like you would use, like, let's say in Photoshop. So it's sort of non-destructive in essence. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this layer just because I did a bunch of stuff on it, and I think I am already in level 2. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and once again, I'm going to name it Anatomy again, Anatomy. All right, and I am just going to start sculpting basically the anatomy here. I'm going to hit W to remove the wireframe, so I don't really need that. And what we're going to do is start sculpting. So let's bring this back over this way. Oh, that's my foot. Okay. I'm going to start trying to sculpt basically the musculature. Okay, so you're just going to see, I'm going to try and follow the striations of the muscles here. And I'll smooth a little bit in between. Okay, kind of like that. And then I'll just smooth a little bit. All right, and then we're just going to kind of sculpt this like so. Okay, and you can see we're just trying to get this to go. Now, one of the things you want to keep in that you want to remember is that muscles, they have an origination and insertion point, meaning that they have to start from one bone and insert into another bone. So like this bicep's got to insert into my ulna and radius here. So, and then this muscle here, it comes across, okay? The brachialis kind of comes across like this, which allows us to both well, it's mostly used for flexion and extension. That would be extension of this, but also for pronation of the wrist here. So I'm just going to put a little bit more here, I'm just going to kind of drag that out to kind of. So what I'm trying to do right now is I'm just going to basically show the hints of anatomy. I'm not going too crazy, and that means both by musculature and also by the bony landmarks, the parts that kind of stick out that you can see of the person. Okay, so we'll go here, and I'm just going to kind of go like that, and we'll go here for the spine. Okay, so you can kind of see that there, and then we'll do some of these for his lats. Okay, you can kind of see, so kind of smooth that out. All right, so I'm just trying to get a basic idea of anatomy. So right here we have the trapezoid, so that should come across, right? You kind of see. So I'm just trying to follow the same path as the muscle. So I would highly suggest when you're doing this, it's just good practice to, so right here we have the sternocleidomastoid, which basically goes from the mastoid process, that's that bump behind the ear, to the clavicle. Oops, I meant to do Alt. So we're going to go here, and it's also beneficial if you have a tablet. So I have a drawing tablet, which you can probably tell this makes it a lot easier. So Control is to go in as a reminder, and Shift is smooth. So I'm just trying to, and I'm going to use this kind of as a guide as well. So he has clavicles that stick out quite a bit. So we'll kind of go in there like that. There's a little bit of a pit here, so I'm just going to hold Control and kind of put that in a little bit, and then we'll just smooth it out. It's a little too much. All right, you can kind of see, and then right here he's got his pecs kind of come out. Man, I keep hitting. I don't want stencil actually. Make sure that's off. We'll cover stencil later when we get into doing like more of a textural thing. But I'm going to try and show the anatomy as much as possible and use that as my guide. Okay, so right here we got that rib cage. So I like mostly just using bulge for all of this, you'll see. So I'm not going to get too nuts with like the detail because there's not really enough. But it's easier to do that this way with it kind of a little bit lower, because if I don't like this, if I just hit smooth, I can smooth it out. If this is too high of poly, if the geometry is too high, you won't be able to do that, and then you'll run into like a lot of problems. So just constantly rotate around. So I'm just going to kind of try and get these lats kind of in there. So that back end you can kind of see, and then this kind of come in. He's got the serratus interior here. He's obviously got some stomach muscles, right? So a lot of people say I look like Logan. Anyway, so we got these should be right here. All right. Okay. So you see I'm getting just some basic hints of it, and that is more or less my level 2. So but I also want to try and think about just the bones and such as well. So like there's usually a direct line of the ulna. You can usually see it right there. I'm just going to look on the inside of here and maybe try to get these palms to be a little more thickness to them. All right, we'll just smooth that out a little bit. All right. So we'll just call that kind of a first level sort of thing. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about his head right now. This looks a little bit too much, doesn't it? It's kind of coming up and over. I mean, they're pretty significant, I guess. Okay, something like that, and you should probably have a clavicle here as well, maybe a little bit lower. All right, so you can kind of see. All right, so something like that, you can kind of see in a real vague sense. He's got some musculature. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go levels above to add even more detail. So we're going to, I'm going to hit Shift D. So typically you'll be able to get to, usually depending on your computer, between 5 and 7, maybe 8. And then you'll see the computer will slow down to the point where it will almost crash. So I'm actually going to do 2 levels above. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to do superficial, we'll call this. Superficial. Or duperficial, apparently, because I mistyped. So in here now, type W, can see it's much more dense. You're actually not getting entirely what it is. But what this will allow me to do is I can now get into more of like epithelial tissue and fat and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm just going to, I can continue with this a little bit just to, oops, let's bring that back a little bit. This is down and strength's gotta come down. But I can kind of, whoops, thought I was on this. That's better. And let's make this a little bit wider. So now I can kind of, you can see, but okay, I thought I was holding shift. You can see it's going to be a little bit harder now to smooth things out. See that? And that's kind of what I was talking about. Now, in some degree, that's fine because it's giving me those nice striations of the muscles. Now, the other thing I might want to do is maybe try to show some of these lines, like really kind of show that line better. So to do that, I'm going to go to regular sculpt, and then I'm actually going to go to my fall off, and I'm going to use this one here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Now, if I hold control, you're going to see, I'll just do it here. You see it's going to make more of a cut. And so I can use that to kind of help define some of my lines here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Undo that. There we go. And then I can kind of cut that around. Now, if you find that you're struggling, so I can kind of cut this up. If you find that you're struggling to get nice clean lines, another nice little tool that they have down here is this here. I'm going to take the stamp spacing down a little bit. Is you'll see steady stroke. And what this is that as I drag, it will actually drag a line behind it, and it makes it easier to get a cleaner line. I don't need that here because I'm using a tablet, but if you're using a mouse, you might find that that particularly is helpful for you. So, oops, I got to remember to undo. There we go. I'm actually going to put this on inverted by default so that I don't have to hold control. So by default, it's actually going to go in as opposed to out. So I'm going to move him over a little bit so I can see a little bit better. And then what I'm going to do is use this kind of as a guide. The best way to really learn, someone can explain anatomy and someone can explain how to ride a bike, right? But really the best way to do it is just to ride it and to watch. So what I would do is look at anatomy pictures if you're doing something that's like particularly anatomical, and use that as basically your guide. So I'm just going to kind of look at this over here, particularly when you're first starting out, just because you might not know your anatomy quite as well. I've taken some classes and I've taught some classes on this as well, so it's an area I feel a little bit more comfortable with. So I can kind of guesstimate some of this stuff here where it might be more difficult for you. So you can kind of see I'm just kind of putting more hints in. Like everything else, just go broad to specific. Make sure you get that nice linea elbow going right down the center here, and then he's got his belly button right there, right? And he does have some wrinkles and stuff, but I'm not going to be as worried about that. So looks like he's good like that a little bit. I'm just going to make sure I smooth this out. So, right, and then we'll maybe even kind of put some, putting little imperfections and things as well sort of helps because it gives it a sense of realism, because very few things are perfect, especially on the human body. There are no perfect lines. Okay, so we're just going to kind of smooth that out. This is a little bit weaker in that area there. All right, and then in here, I'm just going to make this a bit smaller. I'm just going to kind of, now you'll notice that I'm keeping this symmetrical, where in fact, obviously, it wouldn't be, right? So, but that's just because it's going to be easier to do all the other things if I actually keep it that way. Another thing I suggest doing is when you are doing your strokes and stuff, so let's say I want to have, this deltoid kind of come in a little bit more, and kind of cut in, kind of, again, just smooth it out. But what I would suggest is when you draw a line, smooth it on this end more and then let it be less smooth as you come out. And that way it'll blend out, especially, again, if you're using a mouse. If you have a tablet, you'll be able to, push harder and less hard depending on what you're doing. So it's just like that. Let's give it a little bit more of an Adam's apple. Just get smooth that out because I don't want it quite that strong. So hopefully you get an idea. I don't want to make you watch me do this whole guy here, but hopefully you'll see what I'm saying. So we're just going to kind of bring this in a little bit. Really, I need to use a back photo because I think I do have his back somewhere, but I would probably go through and use that as a guide. But I don't want to make you guys watch me do this whole thing because it's not going to be super exciting for you. But hopefully you get the idea that what you want to do is use that anatomy, draw the lines through. Okay, so I'm going to call this good enough for right now just because I don't want to spend forever on it. Now what I might do from here is actually do one more level above. Okay, so we're going to call that fine. Then what we're going to do is do Shift D. So now I'm on level 5 and we'll do Shift. We'll do level 5. And I'm going to call this one details. Details. Okay. And what we're going to do here is start putting in like other things. So basically veins and skin folds, things like that. So I'm actually going to go to bulge. And then what we're going to do is make this smaller. And then I can do things where, you know, let me see, does he have, he doesn't really have too many folds. So, but you know, he might have like skin folds like this. And then I can kind of put those in a little bit to give, so you just want to make sure that you hold shift and smooth those out a little bit. But then he does have massive veins. So I'm gonna use this one as a guide here. It's gonna be symmetrical, which would look weird, but we're just gonna, so I'll just kind of just draw out that vein and just make sure I smooth it out. Right. So some things like veins in particular, it's super helpful to have a reference point because it's kind of hard to know exactly how the veins are going to go. There is an anatomy to it, and there is a consistency to it, but it can be kind of difficult. So I think he had, he's got some veins and stuff going on here, but he's got like these really tight like striations here where I could kind of like try to put some of those in there, kind of a thing, to try and get there to be a little bit more, it's a bit, there you go. So you get kind of the idea, just kind of smooth that out. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let's see, he's got, so like in here, he's still got like some sort of like folds in between, kind of, so I can kind of try and hint at like, oops, that was a bit strong. I didn't want it to be quite that strong, but try to put some of that in there as well. Kind of a thing. It doesn't look very good. Nice thing is though, if I don't like it, I can always just use that erase. Oops, that was weird. Like, skip there for a second. And then do something like that. Okay. Just so you get the idea. All right. So I'd go through and, do a nicer job when you're seeing here. It looks a bit plastic, but I think you get the idea. Okay. So then I might go one more level above. Okay. So 1 or 2 more levels. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Shift D. And we'll do 1 level to start with just because I'm recording. So it's going to take, and you're going to see it's going to really start to, oops, don't mind that. It's going to really start to struggle. You might see the thing down there. It's a good idea to, as you're doing this, to save your versions. In fact, actually, I'm going to go ahead and save this file, save scene as, and then let's just do this as number 3. Okay. So I should have done that actually before I did this. So I'm going to do level 6 just because I think it'll be good enough. And this one, we're going to put texture. Okay. So in texture, what you're going to want to do is basically add the textural elements. So basically things that are more like surface characteristics, not things that are like forms that you're carving into. Okay, so to do this, there are a variety of tools. So you don't, like, if I wanted to see, he doesn't, let's say he's a lizard man, just to make this a little bit easier. If I want to put like a lizard scaly texture on this, none of these are really going to be able to do them by default. So I'm going to choose the regular sculpt. And then we have these 2 options here. Okay, I'm going to take my fall off and I'm going to go back to, let's do this one. You'll see we have stamp and we have stencil. All right, I'm going to show you both of these and then you can kind of choose which one you think works better for you under your specific instance. So if I go to stamp, what this is going to do is it's going to use these alphas and then it's going to just repeat them. So for instance, if I grab this one, basically it works kind of like Photoshop where it's going to, as I draw this, let's make this bigger. Oops, LB, there it goes. It's going to basically drag that around. Now you can see it doesn't look very good. So you want to make a couple adjustments to this. So let's say I'm trying to use this because this is kind of textural. Let's see. I'll just use this one. So a couple things I would do is this. Right off the bat, take the spacing up. Normally you want the spacing less. But if I do the spacing up, you're going to see it's going to, let's do it even more. And then let's make this smaller so you can see. It's going to only ever, it's doing dot, 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 depending on this. So if I go 100%, see the dots? So that will make sure that if you keep this down, right, it'll streak, which isn't what we want. So I'm actually going to turn this off from invert. So you're going to up the stamp spacing so that you have it working like that. Problem is it also still looks, and let's take that and let's make this weaker. It still looks very repeaty. So another thing you can do is also use randomize. So it might be more obvious. Let's use this one as an example. If I turn this off, what you're going to see as I draw, let's make this a little bit stronger so you can see. You can see it's just the same pattern. However, if I use randomize here, and basically what it does, it randomizes rotation, scale X, scale Y. Is it proportionate scale? What's that one? Randomize vertical position. Sorry, this is scale, vertical position, then opacity. Okay, or strength. So what that's going to do now, as I draw these, it's going to randomly position them. Let me draw it in a line, and I'm going to take the stamping down a little bit too. If I draw them in a line now, notice that it's more random. And what that'll do is that if you're trying to create like a more textural thing, the randomize will make it more random, and it doesn't look so much like you're just stamping the same thing over and over again. So you can see now I can get this kind of cool kind of rock texture. But just so you see, you can see it's actually just the polys that I'm doing. I actually personally would probably go one level above, maybe to 7, just because I can kind of see it here. I mean, I guess to here you can, so then it'd be fine there. But that's how the stamps work. So basically, you can have all these stamps in here, and then they will just repeat. And there's other, that's mostly what you want. So you play around with these things. The other thing I would say, just because if it's something you want, you can go here. So I'm going to turn it off. Make sure you hit it off, otherwise it's still doing it. But if you click on this, you can add a stamp. So if you want to go find some sort of like, oh, I want to do a reptile scale thing, you could go find some scale, like a nice tileable scale. It doesn't even have to be tileable, but it's a nice scale texture, and then you can put that in there. You just hit add stamp, and then you just attach the image, and then you can paint with it, which is really nice. I do want to show you this one I like in particular, right here. This one's really good if you're trying to do, let me turn randomize off. If you're trying to do like skin texture stuff, so like watch, you'll see what I'm saying in a second. So if I hold control, I can get like that, you know, where you have like kind of the micro skin folds, just smooth that out a little bit. But see how it gives you that kind of nice, works pretty well. So I like that. I like that one. I use that one quite a bit for like, you know, areas where you have a lot of flexion, right, or a lot of bending. So that one works pretty well. So that's stamps, okay? You might find you like one more than the other one. The other one I wanted to show you was stencils. Let me turn this back off. So you go to stencils. This works in a similar vein, but instead of it being your brush alpha, what it does instead is it lays it over top. So let's say I could take this brick, right? And then what it does now is that as I sculpt, it will basically paint through that, almost like I'm rubbing through that image, okay? Now over here, you'll see that you have the hotkeys in order to adjust it. So I'm going to use the back here as an example. So if I hold S and then, what is this? Right mouse button, right? And then middle mouse button and then left mouse button. And now you can adjust it. Now, one thing I want to show you is that when you get to the edge, it kind of sucks. But you can do this. If you go down here, you can go ahead and use tiles and it will tile it. Now, that's obviously going to work if the image is nicely tiled. So if you look right, oh, I thought I was hitting S. Where are you, S? Is that not S? My hotkeys are, it should be S. Why are you? Thought that. Maybe that's S. That's S. Okay. Let me put this back straight. What you're going to notice is see the seams here. So the seams will show. So you want to make sure if you're doing that you have one that tiles well. This one almost doesn't tile too bad. I mean, it kind of works. So it's important if you're going to use that tile feature, which usually I do, to make sure that it's like that. So, and again, you can go ahead and add your own stencils. So let's just click on this. I'll get back to that. All right, so that. trying to think if there's anything else with this. There's some other options as well that you can choose. But it is pretty handy. Like you can see this grass one works pretty good. And then you just paint through it and voila. Now you have that. The nice thing with this one, oh, and if you hit Q, it'll turn it off. But you can still, I don't know, I guess it has to be on. Oh, it didn't have to. The nice thing with this one though is that you don't have to worry about it being like seeing a repeating pattern because you're using it as a whole. So depending on what you're trying to do, sometimes some things work better than others. So for instance, I've had people that will use like the actual image of a person's face and then use it as a stencil. Because you can use this also with the paint tool. We'll get to that afterwards. And then just stencil through for the painting. And that way they just paint directly the face onto the person, which is kind of handy. So yeah, he doesn't have too much as far as like textural components are concerned. Let me see. Any of these? I mean, this is like skin sort of, but you can see it's really. Is that not S? Oh, it's D. So I could go something like this and then just hold Control, and you can see I can add basically. So let's hit Q. We can add some like follicle situation here. But depending on what your character is, some of these may or may not work. I would say even if you're doing a cartoony character, it might be worth putting some of these textural components in. Otherwise, it's just going to be like even now his skin's like too smooth, right? So I might actually take one of these. I'll find one that like works for me. And then I will just do a real light version of it. Like just make sure that it's really dense and then just make sure my brush is really weak. Because what that's going to do is it's just going to break it up a little bit. So he's not so you can see, right? And Q. So now you can see he's got a little bit of some skin texture on him. Okay. Now notice too, where the geometry is more dense, you're going to see it be denser. So this is why we try to get the geometry to be as even as possible. All right, so hopefully, so that's generally the way that I do it. So what you're going to want to do is just make general adjustments first, right, like we did in the previous video. Then I go through and I just kind of put like the hints of bigger anatomy, basically things that are going to affect the silhouette. Then I'll go to like kind of superficial things where it's like details that are kind of on top of it, so like veins and folds and things like that, right? Maybe a little bit more anatomy, maybe some like more definition. Then I'll go to the detail section. I know I said details here, but the detail section, and then add some more of that sort of stuff, and then finally the texture at the end. But don't try to go do anatomy at these high levels, like at the really high level, because you'll find that you can't erase it. It gets very difficult to do. And if you don't like it, you can always just turn it off or turn it back on. Most of the time, what you're going to want to do is work in as low level as possible, because you're going to find it's just going to be difficult to sculpt, right? So my computer is pretty good, but you're like at level 6, yours, depending on what you have. Like if it doesn't have a dedicated video graphics card, yours is going to really chug on this. So it kind of depends on the computer. Some computers will do a lot better than other ones. Hopefully that all makes sense. That's roughly what we want to do. So what you're going to want to do is kind of do that per section. So you would do this section, and then I would do like the pants, the boots, that sort of thing. Okay. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So good luck with that.